Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start our program. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Armenian Studies Program and the Center for Creativity and the Arts to welcome you to today's panel discussion, panel talk. The purpose of today's talk is to really introduce an exhibit which is going up at the M Street Graduate Studios. It's up there, and tomorrow night between 5 and 8 p.m. there will be an opening reception downtown on M Street of this new exhibit about chaos and the regret of war, featuring two artists, Henrik Abedian from Atlanta, Georgia, and the late artist Varaz Samuelian from Fresno, California. The genesis of this project came through a discussion that I had with Dr. Cindy Urrutia, who is the director of the Center for the Creativity and the Arts, and she had met the artist Henrik Abedian in Atlanta, and read about and seen his works actually. She said, how can we cooperate and get another Armenian artist that would also sort of intersect with his art? And I suggested immediately that we look at the art of Varaz Samuelian. So today the purpose is to give a presentation. I will speak a little bit about Varaz Samuelian and about his art, and then Henrik will speak a little bit about his art, and then at the end we're going to have a chance to open it up to the audience and have a little bit of a panel discussion and a discussion about the art and the purpose in the art. One of the subheadings of the exhibit was the rejection of violence. And so when we look at these two artists, in very different ways, they have a focus on violence, but as we'll see, that focus in violence in their art is going to take very different directions. So I'd like to start off today by introducing you to the art of Varaz Samuelian, and I have a little bit of a PowerPoint to go along with it to introduce some of you to this artist and then what informed his works. What was the background? Why did he produce the types of art that he did? This is a self-portrait that Varaz Samuelian did in Fresno in 1979. He was born in 1917 in Armenia, historic Armenia, and died in 1995. This is an image of his actual studio, which was on San Benito Avenue in downtown Fresno. Actually, he had a very large property with a house on it that he lived in sometimes, but usually he rented out. And this was his workshop. This was the place that he worked. And you can see him there in the window. And this was on San Benito Avenue, which was also famous because this is the street that William Saroyan lived on. So this is another connection between Fresno, that Varaz Samuelian and William Saroyan knew each other. So I want to start with a little bit about the art and the philosophy of Varaz. There's an interesting booklet, I would say, called Who is Varaz?, which was written by William Saroyan. William Saroyan is Fresno's sort of most famous American Armenian writer. And he says, this man, speaking about Varaz, is an artist. He lives art. Other painters teach us at universities, but he paints signs for a living. So let me think about Varaz and his art. So it's kind of thinking about this man who spent his entire life producing art. The volume of his work is so immense in all areas, in all types of art, from his lithographs to his oil paintings to his sculpture. And in that same book that Saroyan asked the question, he says, he asked Varaz, what does his art mean? And actually, Saroyan responds, it means everything, and I'm not being glib. On the contrary, all art means everything, or it means nothing. And that's not being glib either. In all real art, there is the meaning that is in everything. There is the meaning of stuff itself, including the stuff of sun and light. And what we're going to see in the work of Varaz is this very wide world view where he produces art with a variety of inspirations. Let me tell you just a little bit about his life and background. It comes from his book. He actually was a publisher. He actually liked to write. He didn't just produce art. And it's a book which is called Varaz, History of Armenia and My Life. And it's about his life. And his life, if I were to tell you every detail of his life, it would be a pretty horrible life. It was a life which was exposed to violence at a young age, exposed to war, to genocide, and all of the bad things kind of that we can think about. And I want to just talk a little bit about some of those main points. His parents were survivors of what is called the Armenian Genocide of 1915. The genocide was an event which affected almost all Armenians because it was the planned elimination of the Armenian population in Ottoman Turkey. His parents, both parents on either side, lost their first spouses and all of their children. So his parents were actually remarried after they had lost their first spouse and all of their children. Varaz's mother died at the age of 37 of typhoid fever while Varaz was only 7 years old. They had moved at a young age to Yerevan, which is today in the Republic of Armenia. And his mother actually died of typhoid, but she probably also died of starvation. So 7 years old would have put us at 1922. And 1922 in Armenia was a year of starvation. So can you imagine as a young child what Varaz grew up with? Which was he wasn't an eyewitness to the genocide, but he had heard about genocide from both of his parents, and also he saw his mother die before his own eyes. Now, later in 1945, or 1939, he joined the Soviet Army. Armenia was part of the Soviet Union, and he fought in World War II. So there's the first violence that he himself experienced, war. He served in Siberia, captured by the Nazis, then escaped, captured, and again escaped. So one of his big influences is about his experiences in Nazi concentration camps or prisoner of war camps. He talks about it in the book. Look at the image over here, one of his lithographs called Caves of Death. And you can very clearly see the impact of that experience. He later very graphically expresses the idea that he himself was a witness to the Jewish Holocaust because he himself was forced to throw the bodies of Jewish prisoners who had been killed into ditches. He was an Armenian prisoner, but he had to do that work. And that was an impression which was indelibly etched on his mind. He later escaped, as I mentioned, joined the French underground, and finally made his way to Fresno in 1957. So he actually lived in Fresno the last 40 years of his life. And here's a quote from Varaz Samuelian that I think really will intersect when our next artist speaks about violence. He says, "I have painted most of my paintings in opposition to war, the preparation for war and for the promotion of peace. Certainly peace is not only my desire, but also that of all the mothers of the world and the peace-loving and industrious people of the world. Having personally experienced war and life as a prisoner of war, I am convinced of the horrors of war and the blessings of peace." I think that's quite eloquent in terms of how his own experience, he assessed his own experience, he took it in, internalized it, and instead of doing things that would be violent, he ended up doing things that were for promotion of peace. So this was really very powerful. And I love this. It's a book he calls The Neutron Bomb. So in the United States a few years ago, there was this idea of a new weapon. It was called the Neutron Bomb. And it was ironic and almost, it's almost horrible to think about, right? The neutron bomb kills by radiation. So it kills the people but leaves everything else. So imagine that world where the people are gone, but everything else. Look at his image. It's the emptiness, right, of people, no bodies, and then the buildings. And look what he said about this. I love this quote. He says, "Of all the government spending for war purposes, at least 2% of that amount should be used to open colleges and academies for peace. Instead of warring for personal and collective gains, let them disarm and fight together to clean the air, land and water of pollution. Let them fight against hunger, poverty, and disease." You know, just 2%. I think the United States budget, direct budget for war, I'll call it the Defense Department, is over $750 billion now. 2% of that, can you imagine what that would do? And so this was Varaz talking about his own internalization. And then he expressed this idea of the neutron bomb in his art. These are just a few, look, arts and sciences, musicians playing, but there's no people, right? So what would it be like if there were no people? What would happen to art and to science? These are all reproduced from his books. So if you're interested, I can get you copies of those books. On the left, what you can expect, which we already saw, but on the right, after the neutron bomb. So these headless bodies, right? These bodies which represent the after effects of violence. He also had smaller works that are called The Disaster of War. He had a whole series, The Disaster of War and The Disaster of War #4. But another part of Varaz's art was inspired by his culture, by the Armenian culture. The Armenians are a people that are over 3,000 years old, and he was inspired by that. This is just taken from one page of his book, but he was inspired from the ancient stories of Armenia. And if you've lived in Fresno long enough, if you've been to downtown Fresno, there's a wonderful statue that he himself made in 1970 called the Armenian hero, folk hero, David of Sassoon. So the man you see seated on the horse is David of Sassoon. He's a 8th century Armenian folk hero. He's written about, there's a whole saga about him. He's the Armenian folk epic. And Varaz decided to make this statue, which still stands today in downtown Fresno. But then his work also is about art and life. And so let's read this one. He says, "What is art? Art is a kind of inexplicable heavenly beauty. It is everything movable and immovable, past, present, and the future. It is the wholeness of all things. It is the mixture of the artist's knowledge, experience, and feelings. There is nothing nobler than art." And on the image, you see his work. It's Armenian. It's things about Armenia. There are churches. There are women dancing. And this is about his life. And when he does the life, it's in oil painting and bright, vivid colors. And I just love these two watercolors. He did watercolors. He did oil. The one on the left is of Mount Ararat in the back. That's that blue mountain that you see. That's sort of the most important landmark of Armenia. And on the right, Armenian churches and people dancing, life, church, faith. So this is what really informed also Varaz Samuelian. So this is just a brief introduction. I'll have a little bit more to say in the panel discussion, but that's my presentation for Varaz Samuelian. Thank you. And at this time, we're going to invite Henrik to come up. We're going to just switch computers.
Hello? Yes. First of all, excuse my English. I'm not fluent like him. And then I have a long flight. I have this pressure in my ears. Yeah, let me start talking about art. The art I'm creating, if you call it art, I call it conversation. It's a conceptual art. It's using what every other artist uses. On a daily basis, I'm working with masters in this country. I'm running a digital studio for an art company. And they are the guys who paint like you never see before. But they're painting the same thing over and over and over for years. The flowers, butterflies, trees, and everything. And I'm using the same thing. I'm using the flowers, butterflies, beautiful leaves, but I'm not putting them on the trees in the garden with the sunset in Tuscany. I'm putting them on grenades, on guns. The object is the same. If you see the grenade, if you see the rifle, if you see the gun, it's violence. If you put something on it, although the object is the same, but you have this feel that it's not going to harm me anymore. It's not going to be as violent as before. It's china, it's porcelain. It's not going to explode. That's what I want to say, that with small changes in everything, even in technology, instead of killing people, we can route that to some direction that we don't need to challenge or compete to other people or just destroy to make a point or money. We can make that even with making art and directing those countries toward that, toward a new culture. It's not easy. It's something that you wish happened. You wish, especially when you see the war, when you experience the war. It's no one wins in a war. Your soldier come back with PTSD. I mean, that's the worst thing. When I came to the United States, I was working for a construction company. And the guy was sending his son to Iraq. And I was like, why are you doing this? I mean, because I'm protecting the United States. Anyway, I didn't want to go through that discussion that, hey, dude, we got the wrong guy. And the direction of my life changed. I find an art company, I started working with them. I never see the guy anymore till 4th of July last year. I saw him, we started talking, oh, Henrik, how are you? I'm fine, how are you doing? Oh, man, my son came back, we're dealing with these problems, he beats his wife, he does this, he does, and I was like, dude, did you ever see war? Did you ever kill someone? You kill yourself when you kill someone. I lost my friends in war. It was horrible. It was, I can't forget that. And this, what I'm doing here, it's a joke. I just want to open a conversation. That's it. That if you come to the point that you talk with someone else about guns and how these things happening in our society, like, oh, guns gonna stop guns. Let me explain this. You have a kid in the school with a stick that hits other kids, yeah? What you gonna do? You're gonna give other kids sticks to stick each other, or the other kids to stick the kid? No, you're gonna take that stick away. This is the easy explanation that I understand the Second Amendment, I really do. But even the religion changed. Religion changed. Now they're starting believing on aliens. You're telling me that you cannot change something like that? I think it gets too political. Okay, let me talk about, I really like the beauty. I really do. I love beautiful pieces. I love different kind of artists. I got influence of everyone, from Andy Warhol to Michelangelo, everyone. And if I can use their work in my work to get to the point, I will do it. And I almost did. Wherever I went, I opened the conversation, or people start talking about, oh, what do you mean with that piece? I said, let me tell you what I mean. If you're an artist, if you're a creator, not art, I'm not calling myself artist. If you're a person who creates, the very first person that you making satisfied is yourself. If it's not that and you're making that for someone else, you're not an artist. If you're making that for money, that's never going to work out. If you're satisfied first, you're going to find people who are satisfied. And even if you're not satisfied, even if your art is not good, but it's noticeable that someone comes to you and says, hey dude, your art is not good, that's fantastic. That's really good, because even if either he's right and you're going to make something about it, or you know he's mean. But if someone just passed your art without noticing, that's bad. That no one sees your art. And that's what's happening on my daily basis, that this guy's creating this beautiful, colorful sceneries, and just people passing by, because for thousands of years they saw much better than that. And if you talk to them and say, hey, you have to change something, you have to say something, they just get offended. It's really interesting. It's like when you're talking with someone about their religion. It's exactly the same thing. It says, dude, I understand you believe in that, but this point is not okay. They get offended. They can't explain, but they get offended. The same thing is with the artist. When you say, hey, it's beautiful, but I think we have to do something about this. They're like, no, we're not going to do anything. And if you tell them that, hey, dude, you did this for 13 years, I'm working with you, and nothing changed. Nothing changed. Nothing changed in people's mind. People didn't get influence of your pieces. People even don't want to talk about it. And they call themselves artists. I think if you don't have a message in your work is a fantastic craft, it's not an art. If you cannot talk, if you cannot have a conversation, just put down your whatever you have, your computer, your paintbrush, whatever it is, go home. If you want to see my work, I can show you right now. Good? I think this might be okay. All right. This is actually the very first piece I made. When I was soldier, one of the things that you do is that you take apart the grenade or rifle or whatever it is. You just take the magazine out, the patron, everything. I mean, the bullets, everything. What is interesting, you take all these things out and you put it on the table. This is the rifle, this is the bullets, the magazine, everything. Then someone comes in. Although you know you take everything out, there's nothing in it. If someone comes in and pointed to you, you were still shaking. You're just like, oh my God, now he's going to kill me. That fear is in that object. No other was. Even if I show you that it's empty, nothing is in it. If I pointed to you, you get scared. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to die right now. But what I'm saying is that when you put something that china on it, it takes that fear out. It's just like, oh, it's a china. It's a ceramic. It's not going to harm me. The object is the same. The feel is not the same anymore. That's what you can do with everything. With everything. Even in a relationship. That you can go with the same thing, but approach with a different way. This is actually a much better piece. I don't know what you think, but this is much more peaceful piece. This one is based on the country I'm coming from. This is ceramics from Iran. I'm not sure if you guys were in Middle East or see one of those mosques. It's amazing. I mean, I'm a Christian guy. I was born Christian, but I love both of them, especially the ceramics in Islamic culture. I really love them. And I'm sure all of you know this guy. This is Van Gogh's piece that I put on the grenade. The thing about Van Gogh, I don't know if you know that. I'm sure you know that he cut one of his ears. They said he could be a fantastic musician if he didn't cut the ear. This one, I'm not really a fan of this piece, but the guy who helped me to come here, he loved this piece. And I said, okay, I'm going to take it for you. I actually took the pictures of these guns. One of my friends had a gun shop, and we always had this discussion. But he's a fantastic guy. He's an American guy. I met him 13 years ago, and I'm still friend with him. He's one of my best friends, and I asked him to take some pictures of his grenades, guns, rifles, and everything. And he said, hey, come on. And he was like, what is this for? I said, this is about something against you. And still, he was like, oh, fine. But what I'm saying is that although this is a killing machine, but when you look at the detail of this machine and the person who created, I'm not sure what was in the mind of that person. I'm not sure if the killing another person was in his mind, but the engineering on that piece is phenomenal. It's just, that piece is 100-something years old piece, and when you go piece by piece and put it together, it's an art. It is beautiful. But it should stay in that point that is beautiful. And it should stay in some people's collection in a museum or somewhere. It shouldn't be the killing. I mean, come on, it's 2018 and we're still killing each other. This is ridiculous. It's unbelievable. We're still using fossil to just running our SUVs. I know there are so many discussions about these things, but it doesn't make sense to me anymore. It doesn't. 10 years ago, yes. 5 years ago, yes. Today, it doesn't make sense to me at all. We have the technology, we have manpower, we have everything to have everyone in this world doing better. But we don't do it. Because some people have benefits and making tons of money out of it. And the rest of us like wondering, what should we do? And here I am, opening this conversation, that what should we do? Should we go and wait to another mass shooting in a school? This is ridiculous. And this is the guy I really like, Andy Warhol. He said, I like boring things. The dude did drugs all the time, loved Marilyn Monroe. He was with Elizabeth Taylor, was with everyone, had the party guy, and he always said, I like boring things. I wish I was in his place. Then I have this. This is from Michelangelo. I call this What Went Wrong. This is the first one, and of course the other one is the God. And what went wrong, it's obvious. That's the creation of Adam. And that's the creation of Adam. I was talking earlier today, and I said, if God was looking at that and said, I created that dude, And that dude created that. That creates and destroys my creations. Would God still create Adam again? No, he wouldn't. And then we have this one. I wish this happened, but that's B-52 is sending flowers. And then we have the Ivy Mike. I'm not sure if you know, Ivy Mike was the first nitrogen bomb Americans developed. And in that time, it was an era that they were very into having that perfect family. Husband, wife, 2 kids, Sunday church, and everything. And you're asking yourself that, how are you going to balance this? You think that violence are not going to come to you? It's going to come to you. Not in 1960, but in 2000, like ISIS, like anyone else. Violence brings violence. It's not going to end. If you send your troops all over the world to mess around, they're going to come back and mess around. It shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't. I mean, we are smarter than this. We should have ways to just, we can solve all of this. Oh no, we can't. You know how many people are involved? Yes, I know. There were diseases that millions of people died. They died. Not even 100 years ago. Vaccination, now no one dies. And now we're going back again to the same thing, that we don't want to vaccinate our kids. Should I bring back 100 years ago that millions of people were dying of these diseases? Anyway, I think I got too political. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, I'm definitely answer you later. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Henrik, for your very passionate talk. It was very enjoyable. Thank you. And I really want to thank everybody that's here today for coming out. I want to thank Barlow for your support. It's just been an incredible pleasure working with the Armenian Studies program. I also want to thank the College of Arts and Humanities and the College of Social Sciences for supporting these types of events. At the end of the day, you know, we're here to present different learning platforms, and what an incredible platform we have today. So what we're going to do now is Barlow, Henrik, and I will take a seat, and we're going to open it up to questions. This is your time to ask questions, and you know, we'll also talk amongst ourselves. So without further ado, Henrik, Barlow, if you could please come up. Does anybody have any questions? Thoughts? Yes.
I have a boring question, but I'm just curious on the technique of the gods with the wrap of the image. Is that painted on, or how did you make those?
No, all is digital. Nothing is painted. It's Photoshop, Illustrator, and 2 other programs that I'm using in my workplace. Nothing painted.
So you're not even making an object, it's just
Photography and
cool.
Digital manipulation. That's it.
So in this class right here, that's what they're doing in class. So that's
Fantastic.
a very nice example. Thank you.
I'm just curious your thoughts on, like, are pretty violent video games and movies?
You know, when I came to States, we said law is enforced. It's not like, you know, I lived in Germany. In Germany, law is not enforced. Everyone goes with the law. You shouldn't enforce law. People know the law. Even in a stop sign in this country, I have problems all the time because people still don't know which one should go first. And when you force that in a daily basis, yeah, you force it to control people. People want to find a way to show that thing somewhere else. And that's where those games come in. You know what I'm saying? Games, even American football. You see how masculine and how aggressive that game is? Why? Because outside there, if you do something like that, police is going to kill you. Not is going to kill you, but it's just so powerful that that's what that impression comes in someone. I'm not agree with those games, don't get me wrong, but I'm not completely disagree with it either, because you have to have some way to just let that feeling go, and that's what it is. I mean, I'm not 100% against it, but I'm not even, I don't know where I am with it, actually. I don't know.
Well, I was just going to add that if you take a look at Varaz's art, and now I've gotten a better idea about Henrik's art, there's the Armenian connection too. And the Armenian connection is that this is a very old culture. The Armenian culture is a very old culture. It's not just the 20th century violence that they faced. They have faced violence for 3,000 years throughout the history of their culture. That's true for many people. That's not just unique. But what I find interesting is that the Armenians have always tried to integrate that violence into a peaceful outlet, which was the creative outlet. So whatever form of art that they've chosen to produce, whether it's been painting, architecture, and now in the modern era, so many different forms of art, I find that that's the intersection, one of the intersections, is to take things that are very bad, which we know occur, violence, but then to create art. That's kind of what William Saroyan's literature was about, was also about making sense out of this very crazy world. I like a lot of your philosophy in terms of, I think you mentioned just what Varaz had mentioned. If we even took 2% of that military budget, just think of all the things that we could do. We could have free education for everyone. We could have art schools, colleges. Everyone could do things creatively. Why do we need to constantly think about war and going to war?
One of the things that first struck me when I saw some of Varaz's art and Henrik's art is that it's multi-layered. It's like an onion. Every time you peel, there's something new, or there's something even deeper that we can dwell into. I remember when I first saw the gun with Botticelli's Birth of Venus, immediately I saw contrast, I saw binaries, and that's something that I think is interesting, and I think that if as students of art, we can think about how those concepts work. I thought the idea of a Venus, of this beautiful, idealized woman being born, being superimposed on a gun that kills, right? That's just one layer. And then we can look at other layers. Okay, well, what does that tell us about society? And so forth. And when we're looking at Varaz, I had the honor of looking at several of his lithographs that you'll see tomorrow, and some of his paintings. Stylistically, he had so many influences, and it was just striking that there's a particular lithograph that you'll see tomorrow of a concentration camp, of a gas chamber. And there's two different lithographs with the same subject matter. And one of them is like very decrepit, like if something is dripping and falling. And and another one has these very structured lines. And one of the things I would like to invite you is that when you go to the exhibition tomorrow, you look at these contrasts, this contrast with very straight, rigid lines versus something that's melting, which again can be our points of use, which can be death, which can be the world. There's so much there. So there's some very interesting conversations, and one of the things I'd like to add is when you go to the exhibition tomorrow, it was curated very intentionally. It's not just images up on the wall. You're going to see some of Henrik's pieces, and you're going to see some of Varaz's pieces. And they're divided into different categories. So there's going to be a category of lithographs that have to do with death marches. They're very dark. There's another category of these dark relief paintings. And then there's this beautiful category of life, right? Which is one of the things that Barlow mentioned earlier, is that this ability that we have seen culturally for many Armenians to find ways to bring life and to celebrate life amidst having lived through certain levels of chaos and violence. And then you see Henrik's pieces in many times looking at Varaz's pieces, and there's always this conversation going back and forth. So when I curated this, I was very interested in this idea of conversations and intersections. So I really invite you that when you go to M Street tomorrow, to not just look at the images in the walls, but say, what are the images communicating? What is the first layer? What is the layer? The next layer? Why is this series next to this other series? Why are they facing each other? One of the things that curators do is we try to tell stories. At least I try to tell stories. I don't like to just put things up on the wall because they look pretty. I like to, give you something to think about. So those are one of the things that were in my mind, was the different layers, the opportunity that we have to look at our past and at our present, particularly because both Varaz and Henrik were in the military and have seen and have faced wars. And they have very strong and distinct points of views that are a result of those lived experiences that I certainly can have a hard time fathoming because it's not my experience. But I thank you for being vulnerable, for opening up and sharing your experiences with us. And I don't know if there's anything you might want to share about your experience as a soldier that might have had an impact. Well, we know it did, but if there's anything else you might want to share, the mic is yours.
The only thing I can say is that when they say brothers in arms, it's true. I mean, the people who are going to war with you, your friends, they're really, I mean, there's a bond between you and them that you can't see anywhere else. That's a real emotion, feeling, connection, whatever you can name it. It's there. But except that the reason we are there was, even when we were there in the first place to just shoot, we were like, what the hell we're doing here? Who sent us here? Who are the guys we're killing? Or who are the guys who want to kill us? And it was unbelievable. And I'm still questioning, like, why? I mean, when I went to war, I was 19. I was like, okay, who started the war? Why? I mean, we were neighbors for years, nothing happened. Well, how? Now, what's going on? But you grow up, you see what's behind the scene. I mean, I was born in a kingdom. I had a king. Then we had the revolution. Then war. Then you became a refugee. And it was like, what the, I mean, I was thinking that I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to become a doctor, and this is my life now. Not that I want to become a doctor, I hate that field. But anyway, it changed the life so drastically. I mean, you can't even imagine. It's hard.
I just want to say that the exhibition will be open through the month of October, so if you don't have the opportunity to visit tomorrow, it's between 5 and 8 p.m. tomorrow. We'll have a reception, some food and drinks, and also meet Henrik again and have a chance to interact with him in the art, among the art. I'll also be there. Dr. Urrutia will also be there, so I just want to encourage everybody to come out and tell your friends about it. That this is something that I think is a unique experience, and thank you to again Cindy for organizing and coming up with the concept, and Armenian Studies is very happy to have had the chance to collaborate with you.
Likewise. I think we have a question.
Yeah, Henrik, I was just wondering which war were you fighting at? Is that a war where you were drafted, or is it voluntary, or
No, it wasn't voluntary. I was in Iran.
in Iran?
We were a minority of Armenians in Iran. You have to go, because they're coming after you. And then what was interesting, the base we were 182 people. 182, 2 Christians, 180 Muslims. And had nothing to do with our religions. We were like, where are we going? I mean, why? We were in peace with these guys for years. What happened? But, you know, after years you read about what was behind the scene, who encouraged them, who encouraged this guy, who paid the money, who takes the guns, who sells the guns. And then you're like, oh, okay, now we get it.
And you're a pawn in the game.
Yes, that's it, unfortunately. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, I understand that to certain points, certain years. But now, even the people who making those industries, like guns and everything, they have opportunity to make money somewhere else. I know there are so many people are involved, including my best friend, who has families and things, but change is happening all the time. Changes are not happening in 1 or 2 days. Change is happening gradually. But you have to, or you wanted to have that change to happen. If you don't, then we're going to have everything the same. Next year, I promise you, we're going to have another mass shooting, because I'm telling my friend every year that we're going to have another one, and we're going to have another one. And you keep explaining about the Second Amendment, and we're going to have another one. Unfortunately.
Do we have any questions? Anybody want to ask any questions before we close up? Yes.
Might be too long of a question to answer, but okay, you're a soldier, you were a soldier, and I'm thinking of a soldier I know about your age, who was an American soldier that was in Iraq, and he had to do some pretty terrible things. He has PTSD. He's not right in the head, but unlike you, he did not renounce violence. He collects guns, he worships guns, he has more guns than any one man could ever use in his life, even if he was a career mercenary. You know, the guy lives for his weapons.
Right.
So that's very common in this culture, right? Like where we worship these instruments of violence. I personally don't understand it, but what's different from you, somebody who had that experience in war, versus this guy I know? What changed, you know, because I know a lot of former soldiers, veterans, feel the same way as this person I know. They're very attached to that culture. What made you go a different direction?
You know, I think you want security. I think when they're coming back, they have this feeling that I'm not part of this society anymore. I cannot live like this. I cannot go there, see people dying every day, and come back here, go to McDonald's, have fun with my friends. And I have this challenge that how I'm going to secure myself, my position. There is no one that's going to help you. No. I think the only thing that you still think is going to help you in that position are those guns. I'm not sure. I really don't know why they're still attached to that. But I think some people learning from their mistakes, some people, I'm not saying are not, but they don't want to learn anything else. They think that's the right thing to do and they stick with it. You know what is interesting? I lived in Germany for years. One thing about socialism that we're talking taboo about it, I was talking to my professor when I was a photography student, and I said, what is the most important thing about socialism? He said the most important thing is, Henrik, is that a socialist understands that people wired differently. That's why we have to help each other. For example, I'm making really good money. My brother doesn't. My brother is a talented mechanic. He cannot make money. He cannot survive. For years, I was challenging. I was like, dude, why you cannot make money? But in some point, I just understand that he's not wired to make money. He's just wired to be a good mechanic. That means if I understand that, I'm going to support him the way he survives and he does what he's good in what he's doing. That's socialism. That means I totally understand if you love art and I'm loving, I don't know, cars, you cannot make money, but I need your art, I love your art, I'm going to support you. And they do. When I was a student, it was really interesting. There are companies that they cover your expenses when you're a student, like Porsche, like Jup, like so many German companies. Here in the States, it's just like, you're by your own, bye-bye, you got your whatever it is, now go out, find a job, good luck. And I'm surprised, I really do. I mean, kids coming out of the school, my company is one of them. They're coming in, they have fantastic portfolios, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know, because there is no social help for them. There is nothing.
Thank you, Henrik. I think it's really interesting when we have an opportunity to listen to different artists to share their points of views and their perspectives, and I think that's what makes education rich, is when we have different platforms come up and for us to be exposed to different ideas, and sometimes those ideas agree with one another, sometimes they don't. This is just a wonderful opportunity to learn about the why we see what we see in the work of Henrik, and thanks to Barlow, the why we saw what we saw with Varaz. So this is just a really wonderful opportunity to not just engage with some very provocative art, but to ask questions on the why. And we can agree, we can disagree, we can like it, we cannot like it, but certainly there's some really provocative conversations at hand that I think we've had today, and it will continue throughout this exhibition. And these provocative conversations has given us a lot to think about. So I hope that this has been a good opportunity for you to just think about your own points of views and how and where you wish to take them as artists, as students, as community members. So thank you for your time. And I want to remind you, please fill out those little forms that we gave you at the beginning of the lecture and turn them in. And once again, thank you for coming. Thank you, Henrik. Thank you, Barlow.
Once again, it's been a great opportunity to work, and I hope in the future that we're going to continue the collaboration, because there are many Armenian artists in many different formats that I think we can even go across ethnic lines and compare immigrants. There's a lot of ideas that we could work on in the future, so it's been a great first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.